I feel like I need to sneeze.
Pardon?
I feel like I need to sneeze. It's
Go ahead,
the worst.
sneeze.
Well, it's not coming out. It's the worst. Do I need to sneeze or not? Oh my god.
That's hilarious. You don't look
I'm
fine.
fine.
That was a Hallmark fine. I'm fine.
It's fine.
I'm fine.
Welcome. You are entering into a strange dimension. A dimension where narratives from across space and time come together. Narratives that could have, might have, or should have been all exist here in one space. This is CineCasters Ultimate Timeline.
Welcome back to CineCasters. This is the show where we watch a movie and then pitch it back to one another. I'm Janglez the Stranger, Andrew, and I'm joined once again by Alessa.
Hello.
While Nate is currently working, and so this is going to be like a fairly permanent thing whenever he's away, because this has been working out really, really well, actually, to have an editor's point of view and a female perspective on things. And so today we are doing Artemis Fowl from 2020.
Yes.
And
I had a really hard time with this one.
Really? I actually,
Yeah.
when I watched it, I was like angry the whole way through.
Really?
Because it was like, okay, have you read the book?
No.
That's why.
Oh, so we're opposites this time.
Yeah, I was going to say, actually, we've been, I hadn't really thought about that, but we've been doing a lot of fantasy. All three of the movies that you have been on with me have been fantasy.
I was expecting sci-fi for this one because I've seen like, oh, Artemis Fowl, and it's like there's some tech, but I wasn't actually expecting this to be fantasy.
Yeah, it's all fantasy.
I don't know why.
And all three of the books we've done all three of the movies we've done have all been book
You
adaptations.
frozen for me.
So like that's been really, really strange to do, like 3 movies in a row that have all been book adaptations.
Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I guess. So the reason I was mad, I think, is because having read the book when I was in middle school, actually probably even elementary school, it wasn't a huge favorite of mine, but it was an interesting read. Like it was definitely different from anything else that I had ever read, and the movie kind of does so many weird things with it. Like the main plot is still there, kind of.
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, there's more things that I didn't like than I did like.
I don't know if it was this. I don't know if it was Artemis Fowl or if it was something else, but I do remember reading something similar, or it might have, I don't know, but I just remember it actually not being fantasy. Like it was a spy book, kind of.
Okay. Like Alex
So I don't know
Rider
if
or
it was
whatever they're
Artemis
called?
Fowl or if it was something else.
Okay. I mean,
But
yeah.
it was still about like an 11-year-old kid going off and being the smartest dude ever.
Oh, probably, yeah. There's like Alex Rider, I think they're called. They're like spy books.
Oh, maybe it was. Okay, so I went into this expecting that.
No.
Because that was what I thought that I read.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Yeah, I'm the thing that flabbergasts me the most is how there's a lot of like great talent in this movie. Like Judi Dench, and like it's directed by Kenneth Branagh, who is like generally a fairly good director. He plays Gilderoy Lockhart. He also has directed his own version of Much Ado About Nothing. He directed the first Thor, I think, movie. So it's not like he's a terrible director.
I liked
It's just
the first
like-
Thor movie.
Pardon?
I liked the first Thor movie.
Yeah, like he's not a terrible director. So I'm sitting here going like, what the hell? He directed Cinderella, as I recall, a live action Cinderella, which is probably my favorite of the live actions because it's does the most different. Yeah. And is also not a musical, which was weird. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm torn between like some of the stuff that's happening in here. The dialogue in this movie is terrible. Just terrible.
Yes. Yes.
Like they talk at each other without listening.
Yes.
And you can tell like it's just like all exposition all the time. Like ugh.
Yeah. It
I hated this. I hated everything about this.
Yeah.
I
I
hated Foley the most, the centaur guy.
Yeah.
because he just like overacts being a centaur. Like at one point he just neighs, but it's not like they like put a horse sound effect over it. It's just him going like and like walking off screen, and I was like, oh my god, did he actually just like neigh and whinny? I couldn't believe it. Like I was like, what the fuck? Like, that part got me. Like he just neighs in his human voice. Like, can you imagine the stage direction for that? Like I need you to neigh right here,
and then walk off.
Yeah, like
I feel like he might have been lied to. It was probably that the director was like, well, we'll dub it over. We'll dub an actual neigh, like a horse, over you. And then they just didn't. Oh.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like it was not a great direction and not a great character choice either. Like, I don't know. He basically was told, I think, like, oh, you're a centaur, so act like a horse.
I think so. This movie gave me a lot of like Spy Kids vibes.
I've never seen any of the Spy Kids movies.
Oh, you're missing out. They're so awful. I love them.
Okay.
But it's the same kind of like talking at the characters. Like each character is talking at each other rather than like with.
Yeah.
And it was also just, who knows what was actually happening in that movie either. Like, so
yeah.
I loved this movie, actually. I thought it was fun. It was goofy. It was a feel-good movie for sure. But I do agree that it was obviously not the best it could have been.
No, it was really
still,
poorly
it was
done.
still enjoyable to watch.
I like, one of the things that I also found was really irritating was because what's his name? Josh Gad plays Olaf. Mm-hmm. But it sounds like Josh Gad is also playing Mulch Diggins in this, and I was like, I can't take the way he's talking seriously. Like he just sounds like he has a throat infection, like Olaf got a throat infection. And then I finally was like, oh my god, like all the actors, including like Judi Dench as Commander Root, they all sound like they got singing lessons from Batman, from Christopher Nolan's Batman. Like, I'm gonna teach you how to be a fairy. Like, and I don't know, I couldn't take anyone seriously when we're talking about like fairies and everything, but they're all talking like this. It's so weird.
At least they acknowledged it.
Yeah.
They did acknowledge it, which was just also like the weirdest, most awkward scene ever.
Yeah.
Between Mulch and what was the fairy officer's name? I don't even remember.
Commander Root.
Commander Root, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just...
So here's the other thing. Judi Dench plays Commander Root. In the book, his name is Julius Root, and he's a dude.
Weird.
I just have no idea, like, why. What would be the purpose of changing? Is it just because they wanted another female character in there? Because they're already, like, so Juliet is Domovoy Butler's sister, I think, in the actual book, and she's much more utilized in the series, as opposed to, like, why switch to only having a or why change Julius Root into a female? Like, I don't know, it didn't make any sense to me. Is it just because they wanted to have Judi Dench, like, for star power?
Maybe. I don't really know.
That one was kind of irritating. Like, I have nothing wrong with, like, gender swapping.
Yeah,
characters.
it was a little
works.
strange.
It's just, I don't know. I guess when you're doing book adaptations, you kind of have to, like, really think about what the purpose is of why you're switching your characters, because then you're not adapting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
So even though overall I really enjoyed this movie, I actually have a lot of stuff that's like on the bad list.
Oh, okay. I want to hear about your
what's
bads.
on the good list. I was a little upset over I don't remember his name. Not the butler. Don't call him the butler. What was his name?
Domovoy?
Domavoy, thank you. I was like, I wanted to call him Dom, but I didn't know if that was right. I was kind of sad that he didn't want to let himself cry. I was like, well,
yeah, I think they were trying to play that up as a joke.
Yeah. But it was also, I don't know. In the current times, it doesn't make sense to me. I have so many questions about the ending.
Well, like, what do you mean about questions? Like, questions like, what happened and what are we doing? Or is it more like the kind of good questions where you're like, I'm intrigued, I'd watch a sequel? Or more like, what the fuck?
There were so many things that they left unfinished. What happened to the fairy that was actually, like, going behind everyone else's back and working for the evil person?
Oh, Cudgeon?
Yeah. What happened to Officer Short when she came back with the oh my god, I'm like forgetting the names of everything. Oculos. I wanted to call it an Oculus, and I was like, that's
the
not right.
MacGuffin.
So, like, what happened when she came back with that? Was she, like, originally detained because, you know, they think she's a traitor? Or were they like, oh my god, you brought it back, yay! Like, I don't know. And then, how is it suddenly that Artemis Fowl and his dad are, like, now working with the fairies, whereas before they were, like, these big troublemakers?
I don't know. I don't know.
There was the big event, and then the ending, and there was nothing in between to explain any of it.
Yeah, I think the best moment that explains that for me is, like, when Artemis goes to Holly when she's in the cage, and he's like, can I trust you? And she's like, you don't have a choice. And he opens the cage, and then they're just... she punches him, and then they're just friends. Like, without any explanation. It's just like, oh, I guess we're friends now. Or we're working together for some reason.
Yeah, it was very strange.
It was irritating is what it was.
Yes. But yeah, those are my questions that were left unanswered. How about you?
I think the number one thing that really ticked me off about this book is that, or about this movie, is that in the book, the reason Artemis is so clever is because he, like, takes the time to learn all the rules that affect the fairies. So they constantly talk about needing to be invited in, or there's certain rules about how their magic works, about, like, how he has to protect his eyes from their, like, mind control hypnotism. So there are rules, and Artemis in the book takes his time to learn what these rules are so that he can, like, use them to his advantage. So they think that he doesn't know any of these things, but of course he does. And because the movie doesn't take the time to tell us what the rules are, except for the part where all dwarves are pickpockets, I was like, that's racist. Not all dwarves should be pickpockets.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure they're not in the book. Like, it's just, Mulch is just that kind of, he's just that kind of guy, right? So I was like, I don't know. The only time we ever get any rules about how any of the mythical creatures operate, it's, borderline racist. I know it's a fictional character and a fictional race, but it's like, are we just going to, like, paint all dwarves as being treasure hungry, people? That seems like a racist undertone. So it's this disregard for, like, the rules of how magic works and how the fairy and mythical creatures work in the movie that I think really betrays why the book was so good, because Artemis Fowl is so clever because he makes sure that he knows what all the rules are in play. Whereas in this, it just comes across like he's clever because of plot reasons.
Yeah.
Like I don't actually think this movie version of Artemis Fowl is really all that clever. He's just
he's not.
He's just has a lot of
money. To me, he didn't seem that way at all. We see, like, the intro with him at the therapist, and it was like, okay, maybe he's smart, or maybe he's just mouthy, and he just happens to know a lot of things, right? And then as the movie went on, I was like, okay, he's just mouthy and happens to know things. It's not actually like cleverness.
But it's not like he takes the time to learn them. We never see him like striving towards learning. There's no overcoming. There's no application of his knowledge. It's literally just, how do you know this? Because I do. It's just plot.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, there was that one scene where he's been researching things for upwards of 12 hours and hasn't eaten yet. But
oh my goodness.
At the same time,
like, that's not a no.
Yeah.
I hated the characterization of Juliet as a 12-year-old. So Artemis is much older in the book.
Mm-hmm.
He's like 14 or 15. Juliet is like 17.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. It's just like the only character that gets by mostly unscathed is Holly, and she doesn't even get by really all that unscathed. She's just the most like she was in the book. Also, in the book series, or at least in the first couple books, we never see Artemis Fowl's father. He's not in the picture. He's not a character. Artemis's mom is like depressed and bedridden. And so he's pretty much left in the care of Domovoy, but like that's just the way it is. I see there's certain things that are just like, I don't get this.
Also, his dad didn't actually seem like he would be a criminal mastermind.
Well, that's because Colin Firth is like super awesome. I wish Colin Firth was my dad. Is it Colin Firth or Colin Farrell?
I don't think it's Colin Firth.
Let me give me a sec. I'll look this up. I think it might be Colin Farrell. Yeah, it's Colin Farrell. Colin Farrell seems like he'd be a pretty good dad.
Colin Firth is in Kingsman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. So this one was a weird one. Like those kinds of betrayals are the really terrible things that I think this removal from how the movie was supposed to be, particularly with the rules. Like, so for instance, the Aculos is basically a MacGuffin, but at the end, Holly uses it to save Artemis Fowl Sr., like brings him into the manor somehow. But there's never explained how, and this, I think, is where Artemis Fowl, the movie, betrays the books the most, because it's the rules between how things work that ultimately explain why or how something is operating. So when we don't get that from the Aculos just does things, like it's the source of their magic. It's like, okay, great, but like, what are the rules? How does this work? How does this operate? You've given us none of that. It's just, oh, let's just sit here and use this golden looking acorn fucker and do things.
Yeah, that seemed really strange to me too. Again, I haven't read it, so I wouldn't really know, right?
Well, this is good. Then we're getting different perspectives in terms of how we want to approach the different views, right? Because you've read both of the last two movies we did, and now the tables have turned. So, any other goods or bads you want to get through? Any goods or bads that you want to?
Well, I did wish that there was more about the fairies, and maybe a little bit more about the history of the Fowls as well, because we know supposedly that they have been keeping the secrets of the fairies safe. And I also really want to know how it is that the tech has gotten so much more advanced with the fairies, which again, I guess you can just attribute that to magic, but how? How did they incorporate it? I don't know. There's a lot of things that left me wondering, and I don't like being left wondering.
So you wanted more world building in terms of history.
Always.
Yeah. Yeah. I wanted less plot thrown at me, less exposition, and more time to let a single dramatic moment breathe. What's our ultimate climax here? There it is.
Finally.
Finally. Been waiting on that sneeze for a while.
Yeah.
I do have some goods. I thought the visuals were really good in this movie. I do think that there was some semblance of a good movie in there. Like you can see like there's something they were going for, especially if you've read the book. So yeah, those are about it.
I mean, I liked the little tidbit of David Bowie being a fairy.
Yeah, but that's not really world building. That's just like a here, have a thing.
I know, but that's I think what I liked about this movie was some of the weird like here, have a thing that just kind of it was just funny, I guess. Again, I liked it because it was a feel-good kind of movie, whereas like everything worked out in the end.
And it did. I mean, it set up a sequel too. Like it was clearly like, oh, here, have a sequel.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. You had mentioned before that you had like 1.5 pitches.
I do.
Can you quickly do your half pitch?
My half pitch. Okay, so my half pitch would be to make it into a series. And the reason this is a half pitch, like a show series, like a TV series.
So you want to turn it into a TV show? You can't come on to my show and then start stealing my catchphrase.
No, this is why this is only a half pitch, because I didn't have this one fully developed because there was so much that I didn't know about the books or the movie. Like there was so much that I wasn't getting enough information that I was like, I want to turn this into a TV series, but I don't know how I would do it. So I would honestly start on the morning of the disappearance. Like his father is not there. He wakes up, he's finding out all these things. And then there's a little bit more of like a gradual, like he's learning more about his father as he's looking for his father. And maybe not all of it is good because this whole time it's like, oh, it's not actually that he's been stealing these things. It's not actually that he's been doing all this evil stuff, but, in the movie, but in my version, it would be like, oh, maybe he wasn't always great. But I don't know how I would turn it into a show. I just think that it would be nice to have that long-term span of time that you could pick up all this other information and do the world building. And perhaps have multiple arcs. Like maybe he finds his father by the middle of the season. Or maybe he, manages to get the Oculus over like 3 episodes or something. I don't know. It just seemed really super fast paced as a movie, and I didn't like it.
Yeah, and the same thing that I would do. Like, I think it would be awesome if, like, you know how Mulch like finds the safe behind the.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it would have been awesome if like we actually see Artemis find the safe earlier in the movie or in the season, but he can't open it.
Yeah.
And so he figures out that like, oh, I can use a dwarf to help me open this because I don't have the skills. So he like tricks them into sending the dwarf Mulch in so that Mulch will open the safe. Like that to me makes much more sense than just being like, oh, he found a safe and that's where the Oculus has been this whole time. And it's like, what? Like,
yeah.
Did Artemis know the Oculus was there? Because I thought he was trying to find a fairy so that he could get it from them. But it never explains, like, I'm assuming that was Artemis knew that the Oculus was in his house. But, like, things just happen.
Yeah, and I didn't understand that either because I thought that was the reason why he was holding Holly hostage was to gain leverage to get the Oculus from the fairies.
Yeah.
I don't know, it was just, there was not a lot explained.
Somebody didn't do a good job writing this movie. Or it was rewritten a couple times. Yes. Because the direction was fairly good. The visuals were good. But I really think the writing and dialogue suffer. And having the characters like Juliet and Artemis be younger was a weird decision too. Like, why is he so young? It's weird. Like, I guess they were trying to go for a different demographic than what the books were.
Also, the government would have still questioned Artemis on where his dad was if he was really in that much trouble.
Yeah.
And we didn't see that.
We didn't see anything from the human world, really.
Yeah. Which I felt was really lacking. I think that if it was a series, that we would see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
And it would make a lot more sense.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of things that, like, you could easily have way more characters and way more story going on if it was a series. This is why I often say should have been a TV show.
Yeah. And then maybe, you know, the people who are left to monitor the manor would be like, what the heck is this kid doing? And then they would also somehow stumble upon the fairies, and now it would incorporate the new, like a new kind of side plot of, okay, we can't let this government official tell the world that the fairies exist. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so much they could have done with it.
You could have had like this awesome X-Files reference too. Like where you have a dude who's been searching for the fairies who works for the government, who is basically just David Duchovny.
Yeah.
That would have been funny.
Yeah.
And you can still play it like it's for kids, just make the stakes a little higher and better written.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's your half pitch. I always
That's
just
my
think
half
that TV shows are a better idea. For the most part, there are some movies where I'm like, this is definitely should have been a movie.
Yeah. I just think that there's so much with this movie that they could have done, that they could have incorporated somehow.
Yeah.
And it just would have worked so much better as a series, and they just didn't.
I really think you should read the book. Because if you really did enjoy this movie, the book is essentially the same thing but way better, and there's like 6 of them.
Okay, good to know.
So like, yeah,
maybe I will.
If you did enjoy this, read the book, because I mean they're YA. They're not even YA. They're like a little lower than that, but they're fun read and they're well written.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna get into my pitch then.
Okay.
So my movie begins with an introduction to Holly Short. So Holly Short's actually our main character. Mm-hmm. So we introduce her and we get some world building, and we can slowly see, like, basically she's like starting as a officer with LEP Recon, but she's just been promoted and we don't know why. So basically she is on her way, instead of to the center, the like LEP Recon headquarters, she's on her way to the courtroom, and she testifies against Mulch Diggums, who's a notorious pickpocket dwarf who was responsible for catching him. So she's testifying against him in Haven City, and he was, you know, for stealing like art and treasure and stuff like that. And so because of this, she has now also the other officers in the LEP Recon have now look at her as like, oh, she's not just the daughter of a traitor. She also like is actually good at her job. Like she caught the notorious thief Mulch Diggums. So like things are looking good for her. So when a troll goes missing, Commander Root basically says like, okay, you Holly, you can go to the surface because you've proven that you're responsible enough. So I'm going to send you and a team, not just her by herself because that's dumb. You and a team to the surface to make sure this troll doesn't cause damage. And you've proven that you're responsible enough. So, so Holly's put in charge of a whole squad. The team goes up to the surface. They catch the troll using a time field, and they also stop the humans from like getting in the way by using their telekinesis powers, like with their eyeballs, because that was sort of just thrown away in the actual movie. Like it's like, so they actually like show it beforehand.
Yeah.
They get a control of the situation, and then Holly basically says like, great work team. Like let's bring the troll back down below. I'll be right there. I'm just going to finish cleaning up. But this is all a pretense so that she can actually fly to Ireland to look for the last known, like to go to the last known location that her father was. So her father, it turns out, was considered a traitor because he stole valuable information and then went to the surface world and disappeared. So nobody has seen him in a long time. Mm-hmm. Elves also live for a really long time, just like how Commander Root was like 800 and some odd. So Holly goes to Ireland to investigate, and she finds this old oak tree, and she finds a pin under the old oak tree, and she's certain it was her father's pin, and that this is some kind of clue but before she can begin to investigate the tree or anything further, she's shot with a tranquilizer dart. She wakes up in a cage in the middle of a room and has a conversation with a man in a suit. And she asks questions, like, where am I? Why have you taken me? And, what do you think you're doing? Like, you have no idea what you're messing with. And she's like, why did you take me? And the man in the suit basically says like, oh, I'm not the one who captured you. And he introduces a 16-year-old Artemis Fowl. And the man turns out to be his butler. Right?
Except you can't call him the butler.
If you can't I don't think that's in the book. I think they often refer to him as butler.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Holly then begins to tell Artemis that, you have no idea what you're getting into. And so she tries to attack him. But the cage, break out of the cage, but the cage is made out of wood. And so it turns out, this is not in the book, this is something I made up, but it turns out that fairies can't bend or do anything to wood. It stops their magic. So
Okay.
she would have been able to break out of the cage if it was metal, but it's wood. And so she's like, whoa, this is crazy. I could have broken out of this, but you made a cage out of wood. What human does that? So she's starting to become a little suspicious. So meanwhile, Holly's disappearance is noted at Lep Recon, and they begin trying to track her down, only to find that she's been kidnapped. When they try to get into the manor to get her back, they basically set up this whole thing, try to get into the manor with a small squad, but they are stopped by Juliet, who is now 18 in mine, and her older brother, who is Domovoy, butler. And so they're basically get to do some badass stuff to stop the fairies from getting in, because I felt like they were drastically underutilized in the original film. So then with this stealth recon not working for getting into the house, the Lep Recon set up a time field with the intention of basically putting siege on the house in order to get Holly back, negotiating. So inside, Holly tries to talk more with Artemis Fowl. He's excited. You can tell he's excited about actually catching a fairy, because he's like, man, I didn't think you really existed, but here we are. I managed to catch one, because this is the place that I knew a fairy would show up eventually. I just, I can't believe it finally happened. And so she's like, what do you mean show up eventually? And he's like, well, fairies have been said to come to that particular tree before. And she's kind of weirded out by that, because she thinks maybe it's something to do with her father. Eventually, she gets him close enough to use her she's trying to trick him while he's trying to get more information. She gets him close enough that she uses her eyeball thingy to try and mind control him, but he's wearing contacts, so it doesn't work. And he tells her this. He's like, no, I'm wearing contacts. Nice try, though. And she's like, whoa, this kid knows a lot more than he's letting on. And this is just a game to him. This whole he's trying to get information out of her, and every time she tries to get information out of him or tries to swing things in her favor, he's one step ahead of her. So he knows a lot. Juliet and Butler manage to keep the fairies outside still, and then Commander Root decides to call in the dwarf team, but they too are thwarted by Butler and Juliet, because and we can explain this. Artemis had already thought about how the dwarves might try to get in, and so he set up wood protective fields around, I don't know, actually fields, but he set up wooden traps to stop the dwarves from getting in, because they can't get around wood. And
Yep.
So Commander Root is okay, well, let's try dwarves again, because Artemis won't be expecting that. Now, she doesn't know it's Artemis, but they won't be expecting that inside if we use dwarves again. But this time we'll use a special dwarf. We'll actually call in Mulch Diggums, who we've already met earlier. So they call in Mulch Diggums, who is famous for tunneling and entering, as they say.
Yes.
So inside, Artemis and Holly continue their exchange, and Artemis talks about his home. He says this is the old Fowl Manor. We've been here for generations. It is just because we're under siege from us, because Holly's oh, you think you can get out of the way with this, but we have technology and magic you've never seen. And Artemis is the Fowl Manor is a beautiful home that's been with us for years and years. I don't think we're going to, we've made it through wars and the bombing of London. I think we're going to be fine. He's and it's a lovely home. Wouldn't you agree? You can be my guest here. And she thanks him ironically. She's oh yeah, I would love to be your guest here. But she knows that she's his prisoner. So it's she's being ironic about it. Mulch manages to get past the wood by using fire, something that most dwarves would not do. So most fairies do not like fire. Because it burns down forests and whatnot. I don't know. So Juliet and Butler are unable to stop Mulch from getting into the manor. So, and the fairies are all yes, looks like we have the upper hand. He managed to get to Holly while Juliet and Butler call Artemis saying like, oh, we missed the dwarf, like there's someone in. So Artemis has to leave Holly, and when he's left Holly in the room, Mulch comes into the room. He manages to pick the lock on her cage and get her out. And as the two of them try to return to the tunnel, we see Holly is eager to leave, but Mulch gets distracted by some treasure, and so he tries to steal it.
Right.
So the two of them, once he's stolen it, the two of them find their way back to the tunnel, only to find Artemis is standing right in front of the tunnel, because he predicted all of this would happen. He was like, this is one of the many ways that I thought this might happen, that if a dwarf did get in. So Holly goes to try and move him out of the way, but he remains where he is, and she can't hurt him because in the last conversation, he invited her into his home. And even though she accepted, ironically, she still accepted. And so it turns out, like, if you invite a fairy into your home, they can't harm you or any of your guests. And so she can't, like, move him physically. And so Mulch is like, well, that's fine. I'll just move him. And Artemis goes like, well, sucks for you because you picked up that treasure. It's not actually treasure. It's a fake. And it actually has, like, a built-in, like, incapacitator. And so he, like, presses that button, and, like, Mulch gets basically tased. And so they get moved back into the cage. Let me see where we're at. Yeah. So Artemis goes outside while Holly and Mulch are being returned to the cage, and tells Root that he has Mulch and Holly now, and that he's like ready to negotiate in 1/2 hour. But instead of waiting for the negotiation to come around, the fairies decide to send a troll in. They're basically like, we're not going to negotiate. We're just going to send a troll in, and it's going to destroy everything. And I don't want to do this because Holly and Mulch are in there, but we can always attempt a rescue while the chaos is happening. But we basically, we can't really afford to. This kid seems to know what he's doing more. So Mulch comes to, and he's like, where are we? And now Holly is like, well, we're stuck in this cage. And Artemis now begins to talk earnestly. He's like, look, no more tricks. The reason I wanted to get a fairy and a dwarf here is so that I could, but before he finishes what he's saying, a roar occurs. And Holly is like, oh, that's a troll. They're going to try and send a troll in here. And Artemis is like, oh, I don't really know a lot about trolls. So he asks Holly, he's like, I never read a lot about trolls. I was more curious about fairies and dwarves because they're like the smarter of the mythical creatures. And Holly is like, how did you find all about this? And Artemis is like, I got a book from my father. Or my great-grandfather. Like, my great-grandfather was given a book by a strange old man. And it's a book all about these mythical creatures. And Holly is like, strange old man? Like, could this maybe have been my father? Because, like, remember, fairies live for a really long time.
That's true.
So, like, Artemis describes, like, this very short old man. And Holly's like, well, that would have been my father. But for Artemis, it would have been his, like, great-great-grandfather, right?
Yeah.
So, and then he's like, the whole reason that he wanted to capture a fairy and a dwarf is because he wanted to help use their skills to help find another mythical creature. He thinks that there's another mythical creature that actually framed his father for murder before killing his father. And so he wants to try and like clear his father's name, but because it's a mythical creature, he's like, I need the help of actual mythical creatures to do this. So Holly is like, immediately she's like, oh, your father was like her father was what's the word I'm looking for? Was framed, right. And so she's like, she's like, I'll agree to help you if you agree to help me try and find my father. And Artemis is like, yeah, that seems like a deal. Like, that's fair. And Mulch says, he's like, cool, I'm in as long as I don't have to go back to prison. Because I just feel like I like that. He's got a little bit more of that devil may care attitude.
Yes.
So now with Juliet, Butler, Artemis, Holly, and Mulch all working together, they managed to take the troll down without the use of magic and no time field, which is like pretty impressive. But now they need to find a way out of the time field. So now the negotiation time has actually occurred. So half an hour is up. Artemis knows that Root has set up a trap for him. So when the fairies try to spring the trap and capture Artemis, he has Holly shoot the time field generator, but without anyone seeing that it's Holly. So the field all of a sudden starts collapsing and it creates chaos and awesome, huge action scene where they're all trying to get out of the field. And then finally, after the whole thing is collapsed, Root and the Leprechaun officers go into the mostly destroyed manor and they find no sign of anyone inside. So they manage to get away. And now we see in a different undisclosed location, Holly, Mulch, Butler, Juliet, and Artemis are all making plans to track down who or whatever killed Artemis's father. And that's the end of the movie.
Right. I like that.
Basically, mine is like, I actually wanted Artemis to be the bad guy for most of the movie.
Yeah.
Like, he is like a super smart criminal mastermind who thinks he's the shit. So, I wanted him to be like the bad guy for most of the movie. But I also wanted it to be like the setting up the next movie, which would just be a heist. So he's like literally putting together his heist team.
I like that a lot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, like the beginning of The Italian Job, where they're just basically like putting together the team, and they're like, this is Fingers. He's, you know, the quick-witted pickpocket who can steal all the shit, right?
Yeah.
And this is, you know, technical guy who sits at his computer and can control all the cameras. And this is
Technical
femme
guy.
fatale, because every team needs to have a girl on it for token reasons. You know what I mean? Like, I wanted to do that, except without having it all be, like, done in montage where it just shows them all doing their thing. It's like, why not have the first one be a full movie where Artemis is, unbeknownst to the audience, Artemis is actually the main character? Sort of. But he's the bad guy for the majority of this film.
It's almost like the Great Gatsby, where you have, you know, the main character, or the narrator isn't the main character.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, now I wish that I had done both of my pitches first.
Oh no. Well, because you had 1.5, so I was like, well, you do your half one for. I actually, when you said 1.5, I thought you were going to have more developed that way. Like, you wanted to take it in a different direction than what you actually picked.
No, it was literally just, I had 2 pitches, and one of them was super underdeveloped, and the other one was just kind of more developed, I guess.
Because whenever you say like a half pitch, I'm thinking like, oh, you got halfway somewhere, or you at least have a thematic idea that you didn't want to follow all the way through. I didn't think that your whole pitch was going to be, this should have been a TV show, because that's literally my pitch every week.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that was my half pitch. So my actual pitch is like, it's not nearly as good as that one. I really liked what you had. Now I'm like, oh no.
It's okay. Not everyone can. So I preferred your pitch for How to Train Your Dragon. I thought your pitch for How to Train Your Dragon was better than my pitch. So.
But I also really liked your pitch. Yours was good.
This pitch I think is not one of my best ones, but it's more well put together.
It is. Yeah. It's a lot more well put together than what I'm about to tell you. So.
Okay, well, I want to hear it anyway. Don't be so self-conscious.
Okay, so I would split this one into 2 movies. Again, just, you know, more time frame, please. And this one would be, in the same sense as yours, it would be setting it up for the big event. In assembling the team and all of that. But I would kind of keep the same idea of, you know, Artemis is still the main character. He's still the one that we're following. But I would also bring out a little bit more of the so-called genius of, like, his character. Because there wasn't a whole lot in this movie. And so it would start out, same idea, start out on the morning of the disappearance. And he would, you know, he'd be sitting there, same kind of idea. He's sitting there, he's getting his drink, and he's like, oh, what is going on? Drops the glass, whatever.
That's such a cheesy shot. I'm sorry, but like everyone does that shot.
I really liked it because it was cheesy.
The dropping of the milk, like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, have you watched Daredevil? They do it in Daredevil too.
Yeah, but Daredevil is the best, so.
Anyways, so yeah, we would do that. We would get to see the not Bat Cave, because it's basically the Bat Cave.
Yes, it is.
Except it's a little bit less of an actual cave. And I think that this is the part where I was like, I don't know which way I really want to take it. One way would be that he kind of becomes super reclusive and dives into the research. And the other way would be that he works with the government to be like, hey, you know, I know my dad's missing. I want to help. I want to find him. I need to clear his name. We need to find him to do this.
I feel like knowing Artemis from the books, he would probably not trust anyone else because he wouldn't think anyone else is as smart as him.
So he would become like reclusive.
Yeah,
okay.
Because on top of being super smart, Artemis is also arrogant because of his intelligence.
Okay. So what I would do is I would not have the phone call on that day from the mysterious person. I would have him being like, okay, I need to find my dad. And, we found this room that has all of his research, and it's got to lead to something about his disappearance. Like, what has he been up to? What has he been lying about? Where could he possibly be? And what was he doing before he left? Or before he disappeared? And so I would spend at least a couple days of him just getting familiar with the room, and like maybe towards the end that little the Irish blessing would come to his mind and he would find it. But then he'd be like, I also don't understand, like, all of this stuff about fairies, how can it be real? Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, this has got to be just a hobby or something that he's looking at. And then as he's kind of coming to the realization that maybe it is true, then we get the call from, what was the villain's name?
Opal.
Then we get a call from Opal. And he's like, oh no, like, this is actually a thing. I need to find out how to get in contact with the fairies. And so he does more research, and he finds out, like, there's actually a way to contact them instead of just waiting and kidnapping them.
It makes more sense in the book.
Okay, I'm glad it makes more sense in the book, but again, I haven't read the book.
In the book, I will tell you, in the book, Artemis is not the good guy.
Okay, that's good. I like
ever.
that.
He is, like, it's told from his perspective, but you're like, straight up, he's a criminal mastermind. Like, he's not a good guy.
Okay. Yeah. And so he actually, he waits at the tree and leaves a message for the fairy with, like, how to find him at Fowl Manor.
It's a heart. He just carves a heart into the tree.
Yeah, that'd be cute. And then Officer Short is the one to find it, because for the same reason she's looking for her father, because he's disappeared. He's not dead. He disappeared.
Yeah, that was mine too.
And then she ends up actually, like, willing to work with him, because she's like, this is the place where my dad died. Like, so obviously I'm a little worried because, or not died, sorry, went missing. Obviously she's going to be a little worried because it's like, am I going to get kidnapped too? Like, what's the deal here? And then they actually end up working together, but the fairy government is thinking that she is a traitor now as well. Because she's gone and she's talking to a human. So then they kind of launch the heist, and they're still looking for the Aculos, because again, that's what they need to free their dads. So they don't know where the Aculos is. They send the dwarves in. The fairies send the dwarves in, and then it is Mulch again that finds it. And I completely forgot to mention that the human government is still, like, on Fowl's case about, like, where's your dad?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So that's a repeating thing that should be coming in, like, fairly often. He just wants to sit down and study his dad's work, and he doesn't want the government to know about it, but, like, the government's on his case about, like, where's your dad? What are you doing in here? Like, can we inspect the place? We need to find him, right? So,
well, I mean, they could just get a subpoena and, like, just go in.
Yeah. But he would still hide the room.
Yeah.
Because everything else, like, is more just fairy tales, but that stuff down there is actual.
Yeah, it's like the real
proof.
stuff. And he doesn't want to show them. Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole time freeze thing happens around the house, around the manor. And the government obviously doesn't know what's going on. And then all of a sudden, the house is a disaster zone. And the government's like, oh my god, what happened, right? So now the government, the human government is looking for Artemis. The fairy government is looking for Officer Short and Mulch. And now Fowl as well. And they're, like, fully on the run. They have the Aculos because, again, Mulch found it behind the painting. that's where the movie ends, the first movie.
Yep.
And then the second movie would pick up from one of their hiding spots. And they're like, okay, we have the Aculos. We need to get in contact with Opal. And we need to find a way to get there to make the trade. But they're also at the same time scheming, like, how are we going to make the trade without actually giving Opal the Aculos? And that's where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do here. I don't know anything about this, the magic. I don't know anything about the technology. There's so much that I just don't know.
See, that's the problem. That's if the movie we got actually did more to explain things, you might have something to work with. But because you don't,
yeah, I don't know what I would do. Again, it's the big event and then the ending, and I'm trying to figure out. I was trying to find out how to iron that all out, and also separate finding the Aculos with actually saving the parents and clearing their names.
Yeah.
Or saving the dads and clearing their names. And so that's, the second movie I don't have nearly as fleshed out. But again, it would be a lot more space to actually, they're always on the run. They're always trying to escape.
Especially with having, two governments. I mean, we could actually, mix our two pitches together in this case.
Yes.
Because your second movie, basically leads off from where my pitch left off. And so what you could have is both governments are actually trying to hunt down. So now they're on the run from the leprechaun who are trying to hunt down because they think Artemis stole or kidnapped Holly and Mulch.
Yep.
And then you also have the human government, the British government / Irish government is trying to take
Artemis.
Trying to find what happened to Artemis Fowl and his father potentially. And then you also can do some really cool stuff with, not only is our main group trying to figure out how to save Artemis and Holly's father, but also or fathers, but also the internal conflict that could happen there, because Artemis did kidnap Holly, and even though they have a similar goal, you can definitely do a lot of stuff with how do we make these two become friends? Or from a writing standpoint, do we want them to be friends? Right? Mulch is also clearly only in it for himself, so can he be bought? And so instead of having a game of chess around the siege of Fowl Manor, as I'm going to call it, because that sounds dope. Instead of having the siege of Fowl Manor, now you can play a game of chess where Holly, Artemis, Mulch, Butler and Juliet are all playing against each other, while these outside forces of governments and Opal and are all trying to get at them, and and then the way you do this is constantly make it seem everyone is one-upping Artemis when he's always been one step ahead of them.
Yes. And I just think that there's so much potential to have the whole us versus the world, the group versus the world would be such an intense.
Yeah.
I know I'd be on the edge of my seat the whole time.
Yeah. And then I'm just spitballing here, but what if at the end of this movie, if you wanted to make it a full trilogy, at the end of this movie, you make it seem like Artemis has betrayed everyone.
Oh,
so
okay.
Artemis betrays everyone because he actually set everyone else up to take the fall. But in actuality, at the beginning of the third movie, Artemis didn't betray anyone. It was all part of his plan because he's dope like that.
That would be cool.
I just think it would be interesting to be have the entire time in the second movie. I'm just spitballing right now. Have the entire second movie still be told from Holly's perspective. She's our main character now, not Artemis. And so she's constantly can I trust him? Can I trust him? And at the end of the second movie, no, you can't. He betrayed you. He betrayed everyone. He's the villain.
I like that.
But then in the last movie, you have it be no, he's not the villain. He just had to make it look like he was.
See, there's so much potential. Makes me angry.
That's what I'm saying.
But I really enjoyed it because it was also at the same time, it was just a dumb movie that was fun to watch.
Yeah, it was. I mean, the reason I was angry while watching it is because I had read the book, and the book was so much better than this. And so it did feel hey, if you're going to do an adaptation, I'm fine if you want to change things, but let's make sure we're changing them into something coherent as opposed to just changing them into whatever this was.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. This was irritating. I really
Yes.
enjoy or remember enjoying the book, and this was not that. And there's some stuff in there that I'm like, I don't know how to excuse this. But if I hadn't seen the book, I probably would have been like, well, this was a thoughtless movie that had a lot of like great visuals and some fun moments and this new look at how the world of fairies and creatures works.
Yes. That's exactly what it was to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Particularly if I hadn't read the book, if I didn't know the book, the only thing that I probably really wouldn't have liked about this movie was how forced the dialogue felt.
Yeah, it felt fairly forced, and also just the pacing.
Yeah.
It was so fast. I didn't
Yeah.
understand what was going on.
There was way too much happening that didn't need to happen. And there was way too many characters all the time. Like pick a few characters and stick with them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any last minute thoughts on Artemis Fowl?
No, I don't have any.
Yeah, actually, having talked through this with you now, I'm less mad at this movie.
Okay, I'm glad. I'm glad I could help.
The core of what the book was is still in the movie, except for Artemis being like super smart. That really gets lost in there. But for the most part, sure, it is what it is. Mm-hmm. Would I watch a sequel? Maybe. For CineMasters, yes. But would I watch a sequel like on my own for fun? Maybe.
All right, well, if there's a sequel, let me know. We'll do an episode.
We'll do an episode, yeah. Tight. Where can people find you?
You can find me on twitch.tv/Alessa Lou with 3 O's, where I do.
But you spell
games.
Alyssa weird, so you're going to have to spell that out for everyone.
ALYSSALOOO. And that's where I play some video games like Dark Souls, and I've been playing a lot of Binding of Isaac on it right now.
Good
I don't
game.
know why.
Yeah.
And I also do stuff like crochet and embroidery.
And hopefully soon, you and I will actually be doing some streaming on there as well. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I forgot to tell you, my new computer came in. I'm just
Yes.
waiting. We're getting new floors in my room.
Yeah.
In the bedrooms up here, and so I'm supposed to be getting a hardwood floor, and so I'm waiting for that. And hopefully that should be soon, because now my computer is here, and I'm like, I just want to open it up. But anyways, you can also find me on Instagram at Alessa Rose Handmade, where I basically just post all the things that I make.
Yeah. You can find our band Robot Philosopher, of which Alyssa and I are both a part of, on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and all the places you listen to awesome music like Apple Music or Spotify or Deezer. And you can find CineMasters on Facebook. And right here on YouTube, we have awesome episodes of CineMasters every week with lots of rotating guest people and new episodes of our video essays called This Is a Thing, and new episodes of a bonus cast coming out every other week right here. So stay tuned for more awesome content, and we'll catch you next time.
All right.